The next morning, everything changed. Danny woke up to the sound of heavy footsteps outside the cell. He sat up quickly, his body tense and ready for trouble. The other prisoners were already awake, pressed against the back wall with fear in their eyes. Krathvorak stood outside the energy barrier. His massive frame blocked most of the light from the corridor. In his 4 hands, he carried containers of food and water. "You will follow me," he said, "all of you." The prisoners looked at each other. Dr. Grant clutched his bruised ribs and shook his head. "It is a trick," he whispered. "They are taking us somewhere to kill us." But Danny stepped forward. He did not know why he trusted this alien. He had no reason to trust him. Yet something in Krathvorak's eyes told him that the massive warrior meant no harm. "Where are you taking us?" Danny asked. "To better quarters. You cannot stay here. The guards on this ship have no honor. They will hurt you for their amusement if I do not move you." Danny turned to the others. "I think we should go with him." "Are you insane?" hissed a young engineer named Kevin. "That thing could kill all of us with one hand." "If he wanted to kill us, he would have done it already," Danny replied. "He saved Dr. Grant last night. He stopped the guard from beating him." The prisoners argued for several minutes. Finally, Captain Cole's voice cut through the noise. She had been captured separately, but was now standing in the corridor with Krathvorak. "Lieutenant Harris is right," she said. "This Vrakthan has negotiated with the ship's commander to transfer all human prisoners to his supervision. We should accept his protection while we can." One by one, the prisoners filed out of the cell. Krathvorak led them through the ship to a different section. The new quarters were larger and cleaner. There were actual beds instead of bare floors. There was a bathroom with running water. There was even a small window that looked out at the stars. "You will stay here," Krathvorak said. "I will bring food twice each day. No other Vrakthan will enter this area without my permission." Captain Cole stepped forward. She was a brave woman, but Danny could see her hands trembling slightly as she approached the massive alien. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "What do you want from us?" Krathvorak was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at Danny. "Your communications officer asked me a question last night. He asked if this was honor. He asked what Vrakthan warriors have become." The warrior paused. "No one has asked me that question in a very long time. I had forgotten that anyone still cared about the answer." He turned and walked out of the room. The door closed behind him, leaving the humans alone with their confusion and their questions. Over the following days, Danny learned more about their situation. The Vrakthan patrol vessel was taking them to a processing station where they would be sold as laborers. The journey would take about 3 weeks. During that time, they were at the mercy of their captors. But Krathvorak kept his word. He brought food every day. He made sure the prisoners had clean water and medical supplies. When other Vrakthan tried to enter the human quarters, he stopped them at the door. Some of the younger soldiers complained to the ship's commander, but nothing changed. Krathvorak had authority over the prisoners, and no one wanted to challenge him directly. Danny began spending time with the massive warrior. At first, it was just simple conversations through the door. Danny would ask questions about Vrakthan culture, and Krathvorak would answer in his slow, rumbling voice. Then Krathvorak started coming inside to talk. He would sit in the corner of the room, his huge body taking up enough space for 3 humans, and they would exchange stories. "Why do you care what happens to us?" Danny asked one evening. "We are nothing to your people. We are cargo, property." Krathvorak was quiet for a long time before answering. "I was not always like this," he said finally. "Once I was a champion of the Third Fleet. I led warriors into battle. I conquered star systems in the name of the Empire. I was celebrated and honored by millions. What happened? We were ordered to attack a colony on a small moon. The people there were farmers. They grew food for nearby systems. They had no weapons, no defenses. They had done nothing wrong. They simply lived on land that our commanders wanted. Danny felt his stomach tighten. He could guess where this story was going. I refused to attack, Krathvorak continued. I told my commanders that there was no honor in slaughtering the helpless. I told them that true warriors do not murder farmers. They laughed at me. They said honor was a word for fools and weaklings. They said the only thing that mattered was power. And they punished you for refusing? Krathvorak nodded slowly. They stripped me of my rank. They took my ship. They sent me here to guard prisoners on a patrol vessel. It is the greatest shame a warrior can suffer. I am nothing now. Less than nothing. Danny sat quietly for a moment, processing what he had heard. On my world, he said finally, refusing to kill innocent people is not shameful. It is one of the most honorable things a person can do. Krathvorak made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. Your world sounds very different from mine. It is, but maybe not as different as you think. We have had our share of commanders who cared only about power. We have had leaders who ordered terrible things. But we also have people who refused those orders. People who stood up and said no, even when it cost them everything. The massive warrior leaned forward, his yellow eyes focused intently on Danny. Tell me about your world. Tell me about these people who said no. And so Danny talked. He told Krathvorak about Earth, about human history, about the wars and the peace that followed. He told him about ordinary people who had done extraordinary things, teachers who hid children from soldiers, doctors who treated enemies as well as friends, strangers who risked their lives to save people they had never met. Krathvorak listened to every word. He asked questions. He wanted to understand how humans thought, how they made decisions, why they chose kindness when cruelty was easier. Your species is young, the warrior said one night. You have been in space for only a few hundred years. The Vrakthan Empire has existed for 10,000 years. We have conquered a quarter of the galaxy. We have technology that your scientists cannot even imagine. And yet, you have something we have lost. What is that? Danny asked. Hope. You still believe that things can be better. You still believe that one person can make a difference. Krathvorak shook his massive head. My people forgot how to hope a very long time ago. We only know how to fight, how to take, how to destroy. Danny leaned back against the wall and looked up at the alien who had become, against all odds, something like a friend. It is not too late to learn again, he said quietly. You proved that when you refused to attack those farmers. You proved it when you protected us. The ability to hope is not something you lose forever. It is something you choose, every day, with every action. The warrior was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than Danny had ever heard it. You are a strange creature, Danny Harris. When we first met, I thought you were the most foolish being I had ever encountered. You challenged a guard who could have killed you with one finger. You spoke words of honor to a species that had forgotten what the word meant. And now, Danny asked with a small smile, now I think you are still foolish, but it is a foolishness I wish my own people had not abandoned. He stood up, his head nearly touching the ceiling. Rest now. We have many more days of travel, and I suspect we have much more to discuss. He left the room, and Danny sat alone in the darkness, thinking about everything he had learned. Somewhere out there in the galaxy, there were Vrakthan who remembered what honor meant. There were warriors who believed in something more than conquest and domination. And somehow, against all logic and probability, one of them had become Danny's friend. The other prisoners had warmed to Krathvorak over the days. Dr. Grant, The man whose life Danny had saved by speaking up now smiled whenever the massive alien entered the room. Captain Cole had long conversations with him about military strategy and leadership. Even Kevin, the young engineer who had been so afraid at first, asked Krath-Vorak questions about Vrakthan technology. They were still prisoners. They were still being taken to a place where they would be sold as laborers. But something had changed in the way they saw their captor. He was no longer a monster to be feared. He was a person, complicated and conflicted, trying to find his way back to something he had lost. And Danny began to realize that maybe, just maybe, their survival depended on helping him find it. The patrol vessel was 3 days away from the processing station when Danny made his decision. He had been thinking about it for a week. Every night, as the other prisoners slept, he lay awake and considered the options. They could wait and hope for rescue, but rescue was not coming. They could accept their fate and pray that their new owners would treat them well, but Danny knew the stories about Vrakthan labor colonies. They could fight, but 47 humans against a ship full of trained warriors was not a fight. It was a massacre. That left only one option. Danny waited until the middle of the night cycle. The ship was quiet. Most of the Vrakthan were sleeping or occupied in other parts of the vessel. He knocked softly on the door of their quarters. Krath-Vorak appeared within minutes. He had been standing guard outside, as he did every night. "You should be sleeping," the warrior said. "I need to talk to you, alone." Krath-Vorak studied Danny's face for a long moment. Then he nodded and stepped inside. The door closed behind him. Danny took a deep breath. What he was about to say could get him killed. It could get all of them killed. But he had no choice. "Help us escape," he said quietly. "Come with us. There is nothing left for you here." Krath-Vorak did not move. His yellow eyes were unreadable. "You ask me to betray my people. I ask you to save innocent lives. Is that not what you did before? Is that not why you are here?" The warrior turned away. His 4 hands clenched into fists at his sides. "If I do this, I become everything they already believe I am. A traitor, a coward, a broken warrior with no honor." Danny stepped closer, ignoring the part of his brain that screamed at him to stay back. "You would not be betraying your people," he said firmly. "You would be honoring the code they have forgotten. True strength protects. True honor serves. You taught me that yourself, Krath-Vorak. Every story you told me, every lesson about the ancient ways, that is what you believe. That is who you are." Krath-Vorak stood with his back to Danny. The silence stretched out until Danny thought he might go mad from waiting. Finally, the massive warrior spoke. "There are 2 shuttle bays on this ship. The main bay is heavily guarded, but there is a secondary bay on the lower deck that is used only for maintenance vehicles. The security there is minimal." Danny's heart began to beat faster. "Can we reach it without being detected?" "Not easily. But I know the patrol schedules. I know which corridors are monitored, and which are not. If we move during the shift change, we will have a window of approximately 20 minutes. Is that enough time?" For the first time, Danny saw something like hope in the alien's eyes. "It will have to be." They spent the next 3 days planning. Danny quietly informed Captain Cole and a few trusted crew members. They gathered supplies, hid provisions, and memorized the route that Krath-Vorak had mapped out. The night of the escape, Danny could barely breathe. His hands were shaking so badly that he had to grip them together to keep them still. Around him, the other prisoners were gathering near the door, their faces pale with fear and determination. Krath-Vorak arrived exactly on schedule. He carried a data pad that showed the locations of every guard on the ship. "The shift change begins in 5 minutes. Follow me. Move quickly but quietly. Do not speak unless absolutely necessary." They filed out of the room in single file. Krath-Vorak led them through corridors that Danny had never seen before. They climbed down ladders and crawled through maintenance tunnels. Twice, they had to stop and press themselves against the walls while guards passed nearby. Danny's heart pounded so loudly that he was sure the Vrocthan could hear it. But somehow, impossibly, they kept moving forward. They were halfway to the shuttle bay when things went wrong. A door opened ahead of them, and a young Vrocthan guard stepped into the corridor. He saw the humans, and his eyes went wide. His hand moved toward the alarm panel on the wall. Krathvorak moved faster than Danny thought possible. The massive warrior crossed the distance in a single leap and caught the guard before he could reach the alarm. There was a brief struggle, then the guard went limp. "Is he dead?" Danny whispered. "Unconscious. He will wake in a few hours with a headache," Krathvorak replied. He dragged the guard into a storage closet and closed the door. "Others will notice his absence." They ran. There was no more time for caution. Danny's legs burned and his lungs screamed for air, but he did not stop. Behind him, he could hear the other prisoners struggling to keep up. They reached the shuttle bay just as alarms began blaring throughout the ship. "They know," Captain Cole said, her voice tight with fear. "Get to the shuttles," Krathvorak ordered. "I will hold them off." Danny grabbed the warrior's arm. "No, you are coming with us. Someone must delay the guards. If they reach the bay before you launch, you will all die. Then we all stay and fight." Krathvorak looked down at Danny with an expression that might have been affection. "You are still foolish, little human, but your foolishness has saved us all." He pushed Danny toward the shuttles. "Go. I will be right behind you, I promise." He ran toward the nearest shuttle and helped the other prisoners climb aboard. The shuttle was designed for Vrocthan bodies, which meant there was plenty of space for the humans. Kevin, the young engineer, found the pilot's console and began working on the launch sequence. "I can fly this," Kevin said, his fingers moving across unfamiliar controls. "I think, maybe. Give me a minute." Outside, Danny could hear the sounds of combat. Energy weapons fired. Bodies crashed against walls. Krathvorak was fighting alone, against who knew how many guards. "We cannot leave him," Danny said. "We cannot wait much longer," Captain Cole replied. "If more guards arrive, we are all dead." Danny made his decision. He grabbed a tool from the shuttle's emergency kit and ran back toward the bay entrance. The scene that greeted him would stay with him for the rest of his life. Krathvorak stood in the center of the corridor, surrounded by fallen guards. Some were unconscious. Others were groaning in pain. But more were coming. Danny could see them at the end of the hallway, at least a dozen armed soldiers moving toward the bay. "Get back to the shuttle," Krathvorak growled. "Not without you," Danny replied. The warrior turned to look at Danny. For a moment, something passed between them. Understanding, respect, friendship. "Then stay close to me, little human, and try not to die." They fought their way back to the shuttle together. Danny was useless in combat, but he stayed at Krathvorak's side, ducking when the warrior told him to duck, running when the warrior told him to run. The massive alien moved like a storm, his forearms blocking and striking with devastating precision. They reached the shuttle just as Kevin completed the launch sequence. "Everyone in!" Captain Cole shouted. Danny and Krathvorak threw themselves through the hatch. The door sealed behind them, and the shuttle shot out of the bay into open space. Through the viewport, Danny could see the Vrocthan warship growing smaller behind them. Warning lights flashed across the console. Weapons were locking on. "They are going to shoot us down," whispered a woman named Amy. Krathvorak pushed Kevin aside and took the pilot's seat. His massive fingers danced across the controls with surprising grace. "There is a nebula nearby. If we can reach it before they get a target lock, their sensors will not be able to track us." The shuttle accelerated. The warship behind them fired, but the shots went wide. More pursuit craft launched from the main bay. smaller and faster than the shuttle. Danny watched the distance counter on the console. 50 kilometers to the nebula. 40. 30. A blast struck their rear shields. The shuttle shook violently. 20 kilometers. 10. Another blast. Someone was crying. 5 kilometers. They plunged into the purple clouds of the nebula just as the pursuit craft opened fire again. The shots disappeared into the swirling gases, and suddenly, everything was quiet. They had escaped. The shuttle drifted through the nebula in silence. Everyone was too shocked, too relieved, too exhausted to speak. Finally, Danny turned to HFY. "Thank you," he said simply. The massive warrior looked at him with those yellow eyes that had once seemed so cold and terrifying. "No, Danny Harris, thank you. You reminded me of who I was meant to be." Danny smiled and leaned back in his seat. They were not safe yet. They were lost in a nebula with limited supplies and no guarantee of rescue. But they were alive. They were free, and they had done the impossible together. The shuttle drifted through the nebula for 2 days. The purple clouds of gas and dust swirled around them, beautiful and dangerous. Kevin worked constantly at the navigation console, trying to find a safe path through the storms. Danny spent most of his time sitting next to HFY. The massive warrior barely fit in the shuttle's passenger area. His head touched the ceiling, and his forearms were folded awkwardly against his body, but he did not complain. He simply waited, watching the clouds through the viewport, with patient eyes. "Where will we go?" Danny asked on the second day. "There is a human colony on the edge of this sector," HFY replied. "New Haven. It is small, but it has a communications array that can reach your homeworld." "How do you know about a human colony?" The warrior made a sound that Danny had learned to recognize as laughter. "I have been patrolling this region for many months. I know every station, every colony, every hiding place within 100 light years." They emerged from the nebula on the third day. The stars stretched out before them, bright and welcoming after the darkness of the gas clouds. Kevin plotted a course for New Haven, and the shuttle began its journey. The colony appeared on their sensors 6 hours later. It was a small world, barely larger than Earth's moon, with a thin atmosphere and rocky terrain. But Danny could see lights on the surface, settlements, people, safety. They landed on the outskirts of the main settlement just as the sun was setting. The shuttle's hatch opened, and the survivors stepped out onto solid ground for the first time in weeks. Danny breathed deeply. The air was thin and cold, but it was real air, real wind, real sky. Then he heard the screams. Colonists were running toward them, but not to greet them. They were running away. Children were crying. Adults were grabbing weapons and pointing them at the shuttle. Danny turned and saw HFY stepping out of the hatch. Of course, the colonists had never seen a friendly Vrakvan. They had only heard the stories, the terrible, terrifying stories of conquest and death. "Wait!" Danny shouted, stepping between the massive warrior and the frightened crowd. "This is HFY. He is not your enemy. He saved our lives." The colonists did not lower their weapons. More people were arriving every minute, drawn by the commotion. Danny saw security officers in uniform, farmers with hunting rifles, even children with rocks in their hands. Captain Cole stepped forward to stand beside Danny. "I am Captain Margaret Cole of the research vessel Starbound HFY. This Vrakvan warrior helped my crew escape from captivity. Without him, we would all be dead or enslaved. I personally vouch for his character and intentions." Some weapons lowered slightly, but most remained pointed at HFY. A woman pushed through the crowd. She was in her 50s, with short gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. Her clothes marked her as someone important, perhaps the colony's leader. "I am Governor Linda Patterson," she said. "You are telling me that a Vrakvan, one of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy, risked everything to save a group of humans? Yes, Danny said simply. That is exactly what I am telling you. Governor Patterson studied Krathvorak for a long moment. The warrior stood perfectly still, his forearms at his sides, his yellow eyes calm and unthreatening. Why, the governor asked him directly, why would you betray your own people for strangers? Krathvorak's voice was low and steady. I did not betray my people. My people betrayed themselves when they forgot what honor meant. This human, he gestured toward Danny, reminded me of the truth that my commanders tried to make me forget. That strength without mercy is not strength. That conquest without purpose is not victory. That there is more to being a warrior than killing and taking. The governor was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, she lowered her weapon. Stand down, she said to the security officers, all of you. It took time. Hours of explanation, questions, and careful conversation. The survivors told their stories. They described how Krathvorak had protected them, fed them, risked his life for them. Slowly, the fear in the colonists' eyes began to fade. By the time night fell, Krathvorak had been given a place to stay. It was a storage building, the only structure large enough to fit his massive body. But it was warm and dry. Danny brought him food and blankets. Thank you, Krathvorak said, as Danny set down the supplies. You saved all of us, for standing between me and the weapons, for speaking on my behalf when they wanted to kill me. The warrior paused. You did not have to do that. You could have stepped aside and let them shoot. Your people would have understood. Danny sat down on a crate and looked up at his friend. When I challenged that guard on the ship, you asked me why I did it. I said that some things matter more than survival. I meant it then, and I mean it now. You are my friend, Krathvorak. I do not abandon my friends. The warrior was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion that Danny had never heard before. Among my people, friendship between males is called Krathvor. It means brothers of the soul. It is the highest bond a warrior can form, more sacred than blood family, more binding than any oath. He placed one of his massive hands on Danny's shoulder. You are my Krathvor, Danny Harris. I will honor that bond until the day I die. Danny felt tears prick his eyes. He blinked them away and smiled. Then I guess you are stuck with me. The next few days were busy. Governor Patterson sent a message to Earth, explaining what had happened and requesting assistance. The response came quickly. A diplomatic vessel would arrive within 2 weeks. The Earth government wanted to speak with Krathvorak. His knowledge of Rakthon military operations could save countless lives. Danny worried about this. He did not want his friend to become a weapon, a tool for humanity to use against his own people. He shared his concerns with the governor. I will not force him to do anything, she assured him. But think about what he knows. The locations of Rakthon fleets, the weaknesses in their defenses, the political divisions within their empire. That information could help humanity protect itself. And if he does not want to share it, then that is his choice. But I suspect he will want to help, not because he wants to destroy his people, but because he wants to save them, the same way he saved you. Danny thought about this for a long time. Finally, he went to talk to Krathvorak. The warrior was sitting outside the storage building, watching the stars. He looked peaceful, in a way that Danny had never seen before. They will want to ask you questions, Danny said, sitting down beside him, about the Rakthon, about the Empire. I know. You do not have to answer. You do not owe humanity anything. Krathvorak turned to look at him. I owe humanity everything. You gave me back my honor. You showed me that there is still good in the universe, still people who believe in something beyond power and conquest. He paused. I will share what I know, but not as a weapon. As a bridge. If there is any chance that my people and yours can find peace, I want to help build it." Danny smiled. "I was hoping you would say that." They sat together in silence, watching the stars turn overhead. For the first time since the Vrocthan ship had captured them, Danny felt truly hopeful. Maybe things could be different. Maybe the fear and hatred between species could be overcome. Then the alarms started blaring. Governor Patterson's voice came through the colony's speakers, sharp with fear. "All citizens, report to emergency shelters immediately. 3 Vrocthan warships have entered orbit. They are not responding to our communications. Repeat, 3 Vrocthan warships are in orbit." Danny's blood turned cold. The colony erupted into chaos. Families ran toward the underground shelters. Security officers scrambled to man the few defensive weapons the settlement possessed. Children cried while their parents tried to calm them with lies about safety. Danny stood in the middle of the confusion, watching the sky. 3 dark shapes were visible now, growing larger as they descended through the atmosphere. 3 Vrocthan warships, each one capable of destroying the entire colony in minutes. Governor Patterson appeared at his side. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "We have no chance against them. Our weapons cannot penetrate their shields. Our shelters cannot withstand their bombardment." She looked at Danny with desperate eyes. "Any ideas?" Danny turned to find Krathvorak. The massive warrior was standing apart from the crowd, staring up at the descending ships with an expression that Danny could not read. "Krathvorak," Danny said, running to his friend's side. "What do we do? How do we fight them?" The warrior did not answer immediately. His yellow eyes were fixed on the warships above. "We do not fight them," he said finally. "Fighting them means death for everyone in this colony. There is only one chance." He turned to look at Danny. "I must speak to them. They will kill you. Perhaps, but if I stay silent, they will kill everyone. At least this way, there is hope." Danny grabbed the warrior's arm with both hands. "There has to be another option. We can hide, we can run, we can—" "There is no other option." Krathvorak placed his massive hand over Danny's. "You taught me that courage means acting despite fear. You taught me that some things matter more than survival. Now it is my turn to show you that I learned well." He turned and walked toward the communications array at the center of the settlement. Danny followed, his heart pounding. The communications building was small, but functional. Krathvorak had to bend nearly double to fit through the door. Inside he found the main console and began inputting commands. "What are you doing?" Danny asked. "I am broadcasting on all Vrocthan frequencies. Every soldier on those ships will hear what I say." He paused. "And so will their commanders." The system beeped. The connection was open. Krathvorak stood up straight, his head nearly breaking through the ceiling, and began to speak in his native tongue. Danny understood most of it. He had been practicing his Vrocthan constantly over the past weeks. "I am Krathvorak, once champion of the Third Fleet, now outcast and traitor in the eyes of the Empire. I stand before you today, not as your enemy, but as your brother. A brother who asks you to remember." The warships stopped their descent. They hung in the sky, motionless, waiting. "Remember the stories your parents told you when you were young. Stories of warriors who fought for honor, not conquest. Who protected the weak, not slaughtered them. Who measured their worth by the lives they saved, not the lives they took." Danny could see movement in the windows of nearby buildings. Colonists had stopped running. They were listening, watching, hoping. "Our ancestors built an empire that lasted 10,000 years. They were feared, yes, but they were also respected. They had a code, they had honor, they had purpose beyond violence." Krathvorak's voice grew stronger. "Look at what we have become. We raid peaceful colonies. We enslave innocent people. We beat old men who cannot defend themselves and call it strength. We murder farmers and call it glory. Is this the legacy our ancestors wanted? Is this what it means to be Vrak'then? From the warships above, there was only silence. I have seen something on this world that I thought was lost forever. I have seen courage without cruelty, defiance without hatred. I have seen a human, a creature half my size with no claws and no armor, challenge a Vrak'then guard to his face because he believed it was the right thing to do. Danny felt tears streaming down his cheeks. This human, Danny Harris, reminded me of who I was meant to be. He showed me that honor is not a word from ancient stories. It is a choice we make every day, a choice to protect instead of destroy, to help instead of hurt, to see people, not enemies. Krathvorak paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was soft. I am not asking you to betray the Empire. I am asking you to save it. The Empire our ancestors built was not based on fear alone. It was based on respect. On the belief that strength should serve something greater than itself. He spread all four of his arms wide. Look at this colony. Look at these humans. They are weak by our standards. Fragile, short-lived. But they have something we have lost. They still believe. They still hope. They still fight for something beyond survival. The warships still had not fired. I ask you, my brothers and sisters, what will you tell your children when they ask what you did today? Will you tell them that you destroyed a peaceful colony? That you slaughtered farmers and scientists and children? Or will you tell them that you remembered? That you chose honor over orders? That you showed mercy when mercy was hard? For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, one of the warships powered down its weapons. Danny saw the energy signatures on the colony's sensors fade from red to green. A second warship followed. Its weapons remained active for what felt like an eternity. Then it, too, powered down. A voice crackled over the communication system. It was deep and authoritative, the voice of a fleet commander. Krathvorak, you speak words that many of us have thought but feared to say. Perhaps it is time for change. Perhaps the Empire has lost its way. Danny felt his knees go weak with relief. We will not attack this colony, the commander continued. But I cannot speak for the High Council. They will send others, stronger forces, more loyal commanders. Then let them come, Krathvorak replied, and let them hear the same truth. Let them remember who we were meant to be. The warships withdrew. They rose back through the atmosphere and vanished into the darkness of space. And on the ground below, 2,000 humans watched them go in stunned silence. The next few months were difficult. The diplomatic vessel from Earth arrived. Negotiations began. Krathvorak shared his knowledge freely, not as a weapon against his people, but as a foundation for understanding. The Vrak'then fleet commander who had spared the colony began spreading Krathvorak's words throughout the Empire. Not everyone listened. Not everyone agreed. But enough did. Enough to start a conversation that had been silent for far too long. The peace treaty was signed 1 year later. Danny stood beside Krathvorak as representatives from both species exchanged documents and promises. It was not a perfect peace. There were still suspicions on both sides. There was still fear and hatred, but it was a beginning. After the ceremony, Danny and Krathvorak walked together through the gardens of the diplomatic station. The sky was filled with stars from a dozen different systems, human and Vrak'then ships orbiting peacefully side by side. You know, Krathvorak said, when we first met, I thought humans were the most foolish species in the galaxy. Weak, loud, and far too emotional. Danny smiled. And now? Now I know you are foolish, but it is a beautiful kind of foolishness, the kind that changes the universe. Danny laughed and reached up to clasp his friend's enormous hand. Coming from you, that might be the nicest thing anyone has ever said about my species. They stood together, human and Vrak'then, watching the ships pass overhead. Behind them, the future stretched out, uncertain but full of possibility. The story of their friendship spread across the galaxy. The tale of the human who befriended a monster and discovered a hero. The warrior who chose compassion over conquest. The bond that ended a war. Humanity, it turned out, had something the galaxy needed. Not strength, not technology, not numbers. Just the courage to see a person where everyone else saw an enemy. And sometimes, that courage was enough to change everything. Danny smiled at his friend, his Krathvor, his brother of the soul. They had a long journey ahead of them. More challenges to face, more minds to change, more bridges to build. But they would face it together, because that was what courage really meant. Not the absence of fear, not the strength to fight alone, but the willingness to stand beside someone different, someone strange, someone the whole universe told you to hate, and say, "I believe in you." That was the human way. And now, thanks to one small communications officer from Ohio, and one disgraced warrior who refused to forget his honor, it was becoming the Vrakthan way too. The stars burned bright above them, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the future looked a little less dark. The deep space research vessel Starward Hope was dying. Lieutenant Danny Harris watched the warning lights flash red across his console. The engine had failed 3 hours ago, and now the ship drifted through empty space like a wounded animal waiting for predators. Danny was 32 years old. He came from a small town in Ohio and had joined the space program because he loved languages. He could speak 12 different alien tongues, though he had never expected to use most of them. His job was simple. He listened to signals from space and translated them. It was quiet work, safe work, until today. Captain Margaret Cole stood at the center of the bridge. She was a tall woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had commanded ships for 20 years, but Danny had never seen her look so worried. "How long until rescue arrives?" she asked. The navigation officer shook his head. 6 days minimum, maybe longer. They had food and water for 6 days. They had air for 6 days. But Danny knew that 6 days was a very long time in this part of space. This was neutral territory. No human patrols came here. No friendly ships passed through. Only traders, smugglers, and worse. The distress signal had been broadcasting for 6 hours when something blocked out the stars. Danny looked up through the viewport and felt his blood turn cold. A ship was approaching. It was massive, at least 10 times the size of the Starward Hope. Its hull was black and covered with sharp angles, like a weapon designed to cut through the darkness of space. "What is that?" whispered someone behind him. Danny recognized the design. He had studied it in training. He had hoped he would never see it in person. "Vrakthan," he said quietly. "It is a Vrakthan warship." The bridge went silent. Everyone knew the stories about the Vrakthan. They were the most feared species in the known galaxy. They stood over 9 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in thick gray scales that could stop most weapons. They had 4 arms, each one stronger than any human. Their society was built on war, conquest, and the complete domination of weaker species. Humanity had never fought the Vrakthan directly. The two species had avoided each other for decades. But the stories that came from other alien races were enough to fill anyone with terror. The Vrakthan did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. They took what they wanted, and they destroyed anything that stood in their way. The warship locked onto the Starward Hope with tractor beams. Captain Cole tried to send a message. She tried to explain that they were a peaceful research vessel. She offered to pay for assistance. She begged for contact. There was no response. Within an hour, armored Vrakthan soldiers breached the hull. Danny heard the screams from the lower decks first. Then the heavy footsteps came closer and closer until the bridge doors exploded inward. Danny had never seen a Vrakthan in person before. The training videos did not prepare him for the reality. The soldier that stepped through the door was enormous. Its gray scales gleamed under the emergency lights. Its forearms held weapons that Danny did not recognize. Its eyes were yellow and cold, like the eyes of a predator that did not see people, only prey. The soldiers moved through the ship with terrible efficiency. They separated the crew into groups, scientists in one area, engineers in another, officers in a third. Danny was thrown into a holding cell with 11 other crew members. The cell had an energy barrier instead of bars. Danny could see through it into the corridor beyond. He watched as more and more humans were dragged past, their faces filled with fear and confusion. An elderly man sat next to Danny, Philip Grant, and he was one of the lead researchers on the ship. His hands were shaking, and his breathing was fast and shallow. "What will they do to us?" Dr. Grant asked. Danny did not want to answer. He knew what the Vrakthan did with prisoners. They sold them as laborers to their colonies. They used them for experiments. They kept some as trophies. None of the options were good. "I do not know," Danny said, "but we must stay calm. We must watch and wait for an opportunity." Hours passed. The Vrakthan guards changed shifts. Different soldiers came and went, checking on the prisoners with the same cold efficiency. None of them spoke to the humans. None of them acknowledged that the humans were anything more than cargo. Then Danny noticed something strange. One Vrakthan stood apart from the others. He was bigger than the rest, nearly 10 feet tall. Deep scars crossed his face and chest, old wounds that had healed into thick ridges of darker scales. The other Vrakthan gave him wide berth. They did not speak to him. They did not look at him. Danny watched this scarred warrior carefully. There was something different about him, something in his eyes that did not match the cold emptiness of the other soldiers. The scarred warrior's name was Krath Vorak. Danny would learn this later. He would learn that Krath Vorak had once been a celebrated champion, a hero of the Vrakthan Empire. He would learn that Krath Vorak had been stripped of his rank and honor for refusing to massacre a colony of peaceful farmers during a territorial dispute. He would learn that this massive warrior was serving punishment detail on a patrol vessel, guarding human prisoners as a final humiliation before his inevitable execution. But Danny did not know any of this yet. All he knew was that when a younger Vrakthan guard began beating Dr. Grant for not moving fast enough, something inside him snapped. Each blow sent Dr. Grant crashing to the ground with a cry of pain. The old man could not get up fast enough. The guard kept hitting him, again and again and again. Danny pressed himself against the energy barrier. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might explode. His hands were shaking. Every instinct told him to stay quiet, to hide, to survive. But he could not watch anymore. He opened his mouth and shouted in broken Vrakthan. The words came out clumsy and rough, but they were clear enough. "Is this honor? Striking the weak and defenseless? Is this what Vrakthan warriors have become?" The entire corridor went silent. Every Vrakthan turned to stare at the small human who had dared to speak their language. The guard stopped beating Dr. Grant and looked at Danny with something like disbelief. Danny kept talking. His voice was shaking, but he did not stop. "Your ancestors conquered star systems. They built an empire that lasted for thousands of years. And now their children beat old men who cannot fight back. Where is the honor in this? Where is the glory?" The younger guard raised his shock stick and moved toward Danny's cell. His eyes were filled with rage. He was going to kill Danny. There was no doubt about that. But before he could reach the barrier, a massive gray hand caught his arm and stopped him cold. Krath Vorak had moved faster than Danny thought possible for a creature so large. The scarred warrior held the younger guard in place with one hand. His yellow eyes were fixed on Danny with an expression that Danny could not read. "Leave us," Krath Vorak said to the guard. The younger Vrakthan hesitated. This human insulted us. He must be punished. I said leave us. There was something in Krathvorak's voice that made the guards step back. Something old and dangerous. The younger soldier looked at Danny one more time, then turned and walked away without another word. Krathvorak stood alone in the corridor, staring at Danny through the energy barrier. The other humans in the cell had pressed themselves against the far wall, as far from the massive alien as possible. Danny stood his ground. He did not know why. He was terrified, but he refused to look away. Krathvorak spoke, his voice like grinding stone. You speak our tongue, poorly, but you speak it. Danny nodded. I studied many languages. I believed understanding was better than ignorance. And you challenge the treatment of your elder, even though you cannot win, even though it means your death. Danny swallowed hard. His throat was dry. His legs wanted to collapse, but he forced himself to answer. Some things matter more than survival. For a long moment, Krathvorak simply stared at him. The silence stretched out until Danny thought he might scream from the tension. Then the massive alien did something that shocked everyone present. He laughed. It was a deep rumbling sound that seemed to shake the walls. It was not a cruel laugh or a mocking laugh. It was genuine amusement, mixed with something that almost sounded like respect. You have something my own kind has forgotten, Krathvorak said quietly. Courage without cruelty, defiance without hatred. He turned and walked away, leaving Danny standing at the barrier, with his heart still pounding and his mind racing with questions. What had just happened? And why did Danny feel like his life had just changed forever?